morning, Mark Simeone. Sound check. Can you hear me?
You talking to me, Jill?
Yes. You're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob. You're back. Can you hear me? Bob Ferguson? Good morning, Bob.
Morning, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Bob. It's all good. Thank you.
You can hear.
Good morning, Brenda. Sound check.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. You're good. Thank you.
You can hear me?
Yes, we did your sound check. Thank you.
Okay.
Bob, you might want to try down by your mute button, the stop video start, so we can see you.
George, it looks like the camera's off now, George.
It all went off. I got the same message as before. Your connectivity time is timed out or something. So I started all over again. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but can't see you with the camera. There you are. Okay, you're back. You're back. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I believe we're waiting for Daniela.
Let me say again, Jill?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we're waiting for Daniela.
Okay.
Is that it out?
I guess, but there's a thing will come up or down, right?
When you put it over there without clicking.
What's over it now? Okay.
Just move it.
Okay.
George, put your mute on. That's it.
Okay. David Capper, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Joe. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. Yes, all good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julian Pompeo, can you hear me?
Good morning, all. Yes, I can.
Thank you, Julian.
The audio controls were not enabled. Now they are.
All right. Okay, good. And Kevin Singh? Kevin Singh, can you hear me? Okay, not sure who that is with high frequency. Okay. Good morning, Jeff Hayes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, your sound is good. So if you
Can you see me?
No, we don't need to see you. Not right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, all right. And so back on mute. And
You can hear me?
You sound like you're
All
in
right.
outer space, Bob.
Kevin Singh, I'm trying your sound again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that's better. Thank you. Back on mute. And Ray Gavin, can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, it's
Okay.
Raghavan.
Yes, very
Here.
good for your sound. Thank you. And good morning, Terry. Can you hear me? Terry, sound check.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's good. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
And William Hicks, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, if you can
Okay.
hear me.
Yes, that's great. Back on mute.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and one more. Daniela.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good morning, Daniela. Thank you. All set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Bob, now you're not on mute. That's fine. Okay, good. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this, I think it's our third virtual special meeting of the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee. And you can tell by getting signed on here that there's a lot more work goes into setting up a meeting like this than just us drifting into a meeting room with a coffee in hand and pulling up a chair and sitting down. So I'd like to thank everybody for all the work that they do to get this thing put together. We have some delegations registered to speak, and as usual, staff will manage their arrival and departure at the appropriate times during the course of the meeting. And delegations are reminded they've got 10 minutes time to address the committee on any matter. And members of the public who are watching this who want to join in the fun can call 905-818-6095 and staff will look after it from there. You can also visit oakville.ca and click on the live streaming button on YouTube and watch it from there and register. The agenda was available on oakville.ca under Town Hall Agendas and Minutes. So if you're watching and you want to actually have the agenda in front of you to see what's going on, then you can get it from there. Now, committee members, as usual, will be muted during the meeting. And if you have any questions, I'd ask that you physically sort of raise your hand and wave, and I'll keep a speakers list as usual. And then you would unmute yourself, say what you have to say, or ask whatever question you have, and then mute again. So to get the show on the road, the first thing I have to do is to take a roll call. So I can see that Russ Buckland is here, Drew Bucknell is here, Councillor Deddick is here, Bob Ferguson is here, Councillor Gittings is here, George Gordon is here, Daniela Hampton-Davis is here, Sue Hobson is here, Brenda Sweeney is here, and Jerry Tino is here. And under regrets, Madam Secretary?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, regrets are received from Carrie Colburn.
Yes, I believe she's in BC looking after her father. So Carrie's not here, otherwise we've got a full house. So, to continue, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda today? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. This time we're going to confirm the minutes of our previous meetings. We had a special meeting on May the 19th. The minutes have been distributed. Are there any questions about the minutes? Can I have a motion to adopt? A hand will do. Councillor Duddock, is the motion that the minutes be adopted. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. We had a special meeting on June the 23rd. Any comments about the minutes? Can I have a motion? Councillor Gittings. Any further discussion? Any opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motions are carried. Okay, we have 3 discussion items and 1 information item on the agenda today. And you all know the drill about that. Staff will make a presentation. We will have the opportunity to question staff. If there are any delegates, they will present with respect to the matter at hand. I will then ask if there's anyone in the general public watching who wishes to speak, if they've registered, and we'll listen to what they have to say. And after all that's been done, we'll discuss it ourselves and deal with the matter. And I'll remind again everybody that we are an advisory committee, so our discussion is around the advice we wish to give to Council, Planning and Development Council, and these matters will go to them at their September the 8th, 2020 meeting at 6:30 p.m, which will also be virtual, so anyone wishing to delegate should let the clerk know well in advance. Okay, our first discussion item is item number 4, 4A, with respect to 2031 North Service Road West. And I can see that Sue is taking her place at the podium. And Sue, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll just get the presentation open for you on the share screen here. Okay, I think I'm ready to go. The first item on our agenda today is the removal of the cultural heritage landscape status for the property at 2031 North Service Road West. You'll notice that we do have that phone number for people to call in if you are watching this on Town TV or YouTube right now, and you would like to delegate, you can please call that number, and town staff will arrange for you to be added to the list of delegates. Okay, so we're starting off with a property actually that a number of you should be fairly familiar with, because this is a property that we've seen come before us for several reports over the past couple of years. If you are newer to the committee, you may not have read that several hundred-page report that came out as part of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, but to just give us an overview here, this is an aerial image of the property at 2031 North Service Road West, which is located right actually off of 3rd Line where it meets the QEW. So this is a property that has been through several phases of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy implementation already. In 2017, Town Council endorsed the Phase 2 evaluation report for the Hilton Farm, and recognized the property as a significant cultural heritage landscape and directed staff to proceed to Phase 3 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy implementation, which involves protection measures. At that time, when we brought that report forward, it was noted both by staff and in the consultant's report that the property evaluation was completed from the public right-of-way, as the property owners had not given us access to see that site. And as the property was a corner property, we did feel that we had good information at that time. However, earlier this year, the property owner invited staff and the town's heritage consultants to actually come onto the property to complete a full site review. And so with that new information available, the consultants who actually completed the Phase 2 report as well, so they were very familiar with this property to begin with, they completed a new analysis and evaluation of the cultural heritage landscape, and that's attached in your agenda package. So, as we all know, there's a lot of policy framework that goes around the implementation of cultural heritage landscapes and provincial tools and legislation that we use to help implement the conservation of those properties, from the Ontario Heritage Act, the Planning Act, the PPS, and the Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And one of the most important things is that the provincial policy statement, the PPS, says that significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. So with that in mind, Oakville did, of course, develop our own cultural heritage landscape strategy back in, I believe, 2014. And we then moved on to the inventory, which we also call Phase 1. Out of that inventory, which included over 60 properties, this property at 2031 North Service Road West was identified as a high priority property to move forward with further research and evaluation. And so that was done in Phase 2, at which time Town Council did deem the property to be a significant CHL based on the best information that we had available at that time, noting again that there was no site visit permitted. So the site visit happened in March, right before the world shut down. It was attended by town staff, myself, the town's consultants from Laterno Heritage Consulting, and representatives of the property owner as well. And so we had a thorough walk of the property so that we could see everything that we hadn't been able to see before. After the site visit, the town did commission an update report to analyze the new information that we'd found out at that site visit, and for the consultants to provide us with an updated evaluation of the property. And this is that technical memorandum dated July 2020, and that is attached to your agenda package, and I hope you've all had time to read. Because the findings actually from the site visit, I think, were very interesting. Based on the site visit, the consultants have now recommended that the property is actually not the good representative of a historic Southern Ontario farm layout that they had previously thought. And so features that are typical of that type of layout include silos, smokehouses, wells, sheds, driveways, windmills, so many things. And most of these are actually no longer in existence on this particular property, or they remain only as remnants, being long gone. In addition, the orchard grid, which we had identified as being representative of Oakville's historic fruit growing industry, is no longer clearly discernible due to the loss of apple trees over the past 60 years or more. And so while we certainly have noticed some trees being lost just in the past few years between 2017 and 2020, it does appear that the bulk of them have been lost at a very steady pace since around the 1960s or so. And so with this new information, the consultants completed a new regulation 906 evaluation, and that is the regulation that defines what cultural heritage value or interest is. And what they have said is that the 1858 historic residence does still retain its cultural heritage value. However, the cultural heritage landscape that we thought was there does not retain sufficient historic fabric to be considered representative and worthy of designation under the Heritage Act itself. And so the cultural heritage landscape is then not considered significant according to the provincial policy statement, and it doesn't require conservation. And so there are quite a few photos in your report that you can see. It was a rather gray March day, but we didn't have snow at least. And so we are here before you today with this new information, bringing forward the recommendation that the property should no longer be identified as a significant cultural heritage landscape, and that we should, in fact, remove it from any further implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy. The evaluation has noted that the 1858 historic residence should remain designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. It has been designated since the 1990s. And while the town certainly can update that existing bylaw, right now the consultants have recommended that it is sufficient in terms of its protection of the heritage attributes and cultural heritage value of the residents. But in the future, if the property is developed at that time, it might be worthwhile to look at the preparation of a reference plan that defines what the area of the property is that actually does need to be protected in order to conserve the residents as a heritage resource. So the recommendation before you today is that the recognition of the property at 2031 North Service Road West as a significant cultural heritage landscape be removed, and also that the property be removed from further cultural heritage landscape strategy implementation. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hey, Sue, thank you. That's it. Thank you very much. And I think it was important, Sue, to emphasize that the status of the house as a designated building with the surrounding lands under Part 4 of the Heritage Act is not affected by anything that we're doing today.
That is correct.
Okay, does anyone have any questions to ask of Sue? Councillor Duddock, off you go.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Sue, having been familiar with this property and as a child, are you familiar with Santa's Village?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have heard a little bit about it, but I'm sorry, does it have a reference to this particular property? I'm not sure where what used to be located.
It's very close to this. And I'm going to send you along the link because I did a bit of digging behind the scenes. There was something from the Historical Society. I was just concerned from the cultural heritage landscape that if there was something, there was some sort of remnant there of something, but it didn't appear on this. It may very well be the adjacent property to this, but it's in this vicinity. And so I just wanted to make sure that we sort of vet that to make sure it's not overlooked. So I'll send that along to you in the interim. There was actually a pennant made of Santa's Village, Oakville, Ontario. And I remember as a child, there was a Humpty Dumpty figurine and other things there as well, and houses. So, like I say, that was my only concern. I do agree with the report, but just want to make sure we put that one to bed.
Thank you, Councillor Duddock. Mr. Chair, if I just may, we have actually, it's not especially evident in this report, but the Phase 2 report that was completed for this property in 2017 used a lot of historic aerial imaging maps. And so we haven't ever seen any evidence of Santa's Village being on this particular property. On page 26 of your agenda, you can kind of see what's still there. And having been one of the people on the site visit, I can attest there certainly wasn't anything that I would have thought that had belonged to that particular site or business anymore. If there was originally, it's gone now.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we captured it either in the report, having referenced that there was no sign of outer buildings or base or anything like that. And as I say, I'll send along to members of the committee and yourself so you can have a chance to view it.
Hey, Kathy, thank you. Has anyone else got a question? Yes, I see it's Brenda. Yep, off you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just have a background question. So in 2014, Sue, you had said that when the cultural heritage landscapes report was done, a number of properties, I believe you said 61, were identified as going into being captured in that report. How many of those had orchards, or do you know?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Off the top of my head, I can't give you a firm number. There were probably several that had remnant orchards left, especially some of the more rural properties in North Oakville. Given Oakville's history as a fruit-growing industry, it wouldn't surprise me to see, a few apple trees here and there. Even Lyons Park down where the lost village of Proudfoot Hollow used to be. You can still see some of the historic orchards down there through remnant apple trees. So there's not many, but there are probably a couple of properties, but none of them would be considered like a cultural heritage landscape for its orchard, simply because they're not intact, because without constant maintenance, fruit-growing industries, these apple orchards, they don't survive because the trees have a natural lifespan. And that's really what we've been seeing happen on this property on North Service Road West. Is it doesn't appear that there's been any a plan to remove those trees while they're still alive and functioning. There are certainly still some trees on that property, but the integrity of them has been so diminished that they're just not recognizable as an orchard anymore.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Any other questions? Okay, now we have, I believe, Madam Secretary, we have a number of delegations registered with respect to this item. Are you going to stage manage and introduce us to them?
Mr. Chairman, it's not on item 4A. It's for items 4B and C on the agenda.
Okay, so there's nobody registered for this? Good. So is there anyone else out there who would wish to speak to this item? Okay, I guess not. So thank you, Sue, and I guess it's up to us now. So the staff has given us a recommendation that the property at 2031 North Service Road should be no longer pursued as a cultural heritage landscape. And I guess this is part of a process, and we've got another one coming up. It's sequential. We dig and we dig and we dig and we dig, and at any point during our investigations, if we discover that in fact the outcome is not going to be that the property is worthy of that cultural heritage designation, then we would simply stop at that point. And I guess that just shows to me that the process is working and that it's quite robust. Anyway, are there any further comments or discussion from members of the board on this matter? Jerry?
Just wanted to follow up on Councillor Duddick's comment on the Secret Santa land. I did find the Oakville Historical Society newsletter that related to that. I have messaged it to Drew, but I can send you an email, Councillor Duddick, and within that, maybe if it needs to be noted for this particular property, maybe a good idea.
Actually, that's the one that I was referencing, Madam Vice Chair, was that Historical Society article. I've just sent it to everybody else via email as well. And I'll send it as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do we believe that there had been a Santa village there?
I don't believe, Mr. Chair, I don't think it pertains to this property.
Okay.
The vicinity, and that's why I just wanted to alert our heritage staff to the fact that should somebody say something or raise a concern, they had vetted it properly and they knew of the whereabouts of it. And it shows a map and everything on it. So as I say, having just sent it along to everybody, they can have a chance to look, but I don't have a problem.
Okay, super, that's very helpful. Okay then, if there are no other questions, can I have a motion to accept? Councillor Duddick has moved that the staff recommendation be accepted. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item, and it's Sue up again, is 1297 Dundas Street East. So Sue, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. We are now going to be looking at the removal of cultural heritage landscape status for another property at 1297 Dundas Street East. I would just note that this report actually and the report for 4C on today's agenda were both written by my colleague Carolyn Van Slichtenhorst, who unfortunately is not able to be here today, and so I am presenting on her behalf. And the delegates, I believe, have registered to assist me with answering any questions that you might have. I'm very grateful for their help today, as I've been kind of catapulted into these files for now. So I hope I'll be able to provide you with enough information, but I do have a number of people with quite a bit of knowledge about each one of these files ready and able to help us with that as well. So the property at 1297 Dundas Street East is located on the north side of Dundas, just kind of opposite Meadow Ridge Drive, and you can see it there in the red square on the map. It is currently listed on the Oakville Heritage Register as a property of potential cultural heritage value or interest, and it's listed for its historic farmstead, which includes the farmhouse, barn, and any outbuildings. The property was also one of those 61 or 63 properties that we looked at in the inventory for the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy. This report actually is here to take a look at whether or not the property should be recognized or designated as a significant cultural heritage landscape, or conversely, if the property should be removed from any future implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy. And so we are dealing with the same policy framework that we just looked at for our last property on the North Service Road. There are a number of different policies, legislation, tools that we use to identify, evaluate, and protect cultural heritage landscapes, including the Heritage Act and the Planning Act, with the provincial policy statement and its section 2.6.1 being a very important part of that. And that, of course, leads to the policies that the town has in our own official plan, the Livable Oakville Plan, and then the town's cultural heritage landscape strategy. And so in the Phase 1 inventory report, which is attached to your agenda package, the property was identified as a low priority property. And so in order to further flush out the details that were included in that inventory report, which was always meant to be more of the kind of tombstone data of a property, the things that were easily discernible or knowable about it, the Golder report has taken a really in-depth look at the history of the property. And so, I mean, starting, it's attached as Appendix B to the staff report, which begins on page 60 of the agenda. And it is a very thorough report that I hope you've had time to review. There's lots of interesting information, lots of photos, both of the exterior of the property and also of the interior of some of the buildings as well. And so, but what the report really is designed to do is to look at the question of the whole of the property. Is it a cultural heritage landscape? And in the end, the report concludes that there are individual elements of the property, including the farmhouse and the historic portion of the barn. Many of the attributes of the original farmhouse have either been removed or have been altered such that they now are considered to have quite low integrity and little heritage value. And so they've provided an Ontario Regulation 906 evaluation as well, which results in the consultant's assessment that the historic farmhouse and historic barn, not including that very large aluminum addition, do have cultural value. But overall, the cultural heritage landscape does not retain sufficient historic fabric to be considered representative of a historic farmstead, and is not worthy of designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. And so the cultural heritage landscape doesn't meet that test of being significant under the provincial policy statement and doesn't require conservation. So the recommendation coming out of this is that we recommend that the property be removed from further implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy. And so here, just a couple photos from that report. You can see obviously quite clearly which is the historic portion of the barn and which is the very large aluminum addition. And so it is this historic portion of the barn here that is still considered to have cultural heritage value, as well as the historic farmhouse itself. And so what we are recommending is that the property remain on the Oakville Heritage Register as a listed heritage property for the historic farmhouse and barn only. And then we would be removing the property from any further implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy. Next steps would be that the potential purchasers of the property come back to the town with a proposal on how to conserve the heritage farmhouse and the barn once they have finalized their purchase of the property. And so they are very aware of the need for the conservation of the barn and the house, and the details of this conservation strategy would be proposed at a later date. The applicants have been very willing and receptive to working with staff, and we look forward to working with them through that process. So at this time, we are recommending that the property be removed from any future implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, and that the property remain on the Oakville Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value as a listed, not designated property. And so I'm happy to try to answer your questions, but as I mentioned, we do have a number of delegates, including the authors of the Golder Report and the potential purchasers of the property, I believe, or their representatives, available to help us with those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. So once again, what we're doing here doesn't change the status with respect to heritage designation, only its place in the continuum of the cultural heritage landscape process, which is suggested or recommended by staff that now stop. Okay, any questions of Sue? Okay, this time I believe, Madam Secretary, there are delegates, and Sue alluded to that as well.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For this item, we have the...
Does any one of them wish to speak?
We have the agent and the potential purchaser. They're available for questions.
Okay, does anyone...
Hi there. Can you hear me?
And who is it I hear? Is it Kevin?
It's Kevin Singh. I'm at Argo, and I'm representing the potential purchasers, and I just wanted to make the statement that we have reviewed town staff's report, and we are in full support of the recommendations. So we look forward to working with staff to further this and come up with a conservation strategy that everyone is happy with. Thank you.
Super, Kevin. Thank you. Does anyone have a question of Kevin? No? Well, that was good, helpful. Thank you, Kevin. Does anyone else from the registered delegates wish to speak to this? Okay, seeing none, I should then put the wider call out. Is there anyone else there who has been watching this and who has registered, wish to speak to the committee on this matter?
No, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
anybody else wishes to speak to it? That's now then up to us. Is there any discussion? Jerry?
Thank you, Sue. This is a really, really good in-depth report. And my comment is with respect to the future development of the property and consideration for the heritage attributes, value, and location of the existing heritage elements. And I see the fortuitous location very close to the road. And I would ask for the developers to have a proactive approach and consideration for the heritage elements on the landscape and consider those at their initial concept stage, rather than look at the heritage buildings as a problem or an afterthought to be put into a new development, as we have seen in the past, unfortunately, which required relocation and removal of certain elements. So I think this is really well located for future development that can actually really add value, story and branding to a future development in that area. So it's it looks very positive for future development, I'm happy to say. So just looking for consideration for the location of the existing heritage elements and feature them from the thoroughfare from Highway 5. That's all for me.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure, Sue, you would be part of any continuation of this process, and you hear what Jerry said.
Yes.
Okay, good. Any further discussion or questions? Can I have a motion? Okay, Bob Ferguson has moved the staff recommendation. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. So thank you very much for that. Okay, the next item on the agenda, item 4C, is a review of a development application at 358 Reynolds. And here, what we're asked to do is to receive the report, but more particularly, and most of you are familiar with this process, our comments and input are looked for at this stage into the planning process. So it's not a heritage application that we're approving. It is simply our comments, receive the report, and make any comments that we feel are appropriate to make. Okay, and again, it's Sue on deck again, so take it away, Gal.
Okay. So, the property at 358 Reynolds Street is located within the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District. And again, if anybody watching this right now would like to speak to the item, the number is available on the screen. So please call in, and town staff would arrange to connect you to the meeting as part of the delegations later on. So the site here, you can see it within the blue kind of dashed box here within the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District. It is across the street from the former Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital, which has been now developed into the new community center, and where there will also be housing actually located at the north end of the site as well. And so the site itself contains a 3.5-story building that's been used as medical offices for quite some time. Originally, we believe it was constructed as an apartment building. It has been vacant for several years, though, after the closure of the hospital, which I noted was located directly across the street. So the property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District, and we've also identified that it is located directly across the street from 293 McDonald Road, which has a Part 4 individual designation. It's known as the Campbell House, a very, very beautiful little structure. So the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District Plan doesn't use the more kind of modern terminology that we're used to that identifies properties within the boundaries either as contributing or historic or non-contributing or non-historic. But it does set kind of a bench line as buildings being constructed in the 1940s and earlier as potentially having cultural heritage value. And so we do note that this building itself was constructed in 1954, and it's outside of that general timeline of pre-kind of 1940s. We don't consider it to be of significant cultural heritage value or contributing anything very significant to the surrounding Heritage Conservation District, and staff would generally support its removal. However, before we look at removal or demolition of that structure, we always consider what goes up in its place. And so right now, what we are looking at actually is there are planning applications that have been submitted for the redevelopment of the site into a new 3-story condominium apartment building that has 14 units. This requires both an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment that would convert the property from a low-density residential to a medium-density residential. And the OPA and ZBA have been submitted, and as our chair has noted, we have come to you to ask for your feedback and input on the matters that impact cultural heritage value of the surrounding Heritage Conservation District and the Part 4 property that we've noted right across the road. And so this is a very detailed site plan. You've got an image of this in your application package, I believe, as well. But just to kind of go over what our framework is here, the official plan designation for this area is low-density residential, and it doesn't permit a condominium apartment building. But I would also note that it currently doesn't permit the medical office building, but that is considered to be legal non-conforming because it has existed since 1954. And so the applicants are applying to rezone to a medium density residential, and the rezoning amendment also seeks relief for some of the side yard setbacks and front yard setbacks as well, to those numbers that you can see on the screen and within your report. To just kind of go over the design very briefly, and I would note again that we do have a number of delegations available for this item on our agenda to help me with the explanation of some of these, because they have put an awful lot of time and effort into the design, which is at this I guess, stage in the planning process, being an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, is still considered to be rather high level. The intention is to design a building on this site that has the appearance of a series of houses rather than a solid single large building mass. And so apartment units would be separated by floor on the interior with exterior vertical breaks in the massing so that the units are divided up into what looks like two-story houses. There would be 6 units on both the main floor and the second floor, and 2 penthouse units on the third floor. The third story would be set back into the roof, and it's truncated in the middle to break up the expanse of the building that kind of separates the roof line then into 2 sections. There are dormers, chimneys, and Juliet balconies proposed along the front elevation of the third story. The building is proposed to be clad in a mix of brick, stone, and limestone, finished precast cladding and trim. The entrances face McDonald Road with roof overhangs and stoops on each entrance. And then there is a plan for terraces and balconies for each unit located to the rear of the building. And so, again, these images should be available in your package as well, but we'll just kind of take you through them so you can see how the building, the massing has been broken up, both by that truncated roof line and the vertical lines as well. And then coming around the corner here. And then I think what's probably most helpful is to see the 3D imaging that has been produced, so that you can see a little bit, better the depth of the building, the scale and the massing of the building within the streetscape itself here. There is also a landscape plan attached, and I believe parking is underground. And so what has also been attached to the staff report is a highlighted version of the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District Plan. And I've just included several excerpts here on the screen for you. But of course, your agenda package does have quite a bit more about the actual guidelines within the Trafalgar Road Heritage District Plan, just to help you consider your feedback and your comments in relation to what the district plan actually says. And so what we are looking for here today is, of course, your comments on this proposal, noting that this is fairly early on in the planning process. So your comments will be taken into consideration by planning staff for the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment reports. We anticipate that a public meeting report will be presented to council this fall for consideration. All timelines, of course, are up in the air, given that nothing has been certain in terms of timing this year particularly. And if those development applications are supported by council, then there are still more processes that this application will need to go through, including site plan, which again would be circulated back to Heritage Oakville for comment, and the plan of condominium process. And so at that stage, you'll start to see even more details provided about the design details of both the building and the site. And then also at that time, we would be requiring a major heritage permit for the proposed changes to the site, including the demolition of the existing building and the construction of the new building and the hard landscaping as well. And so that would be coming back to you as well for review and for your recommendations to council as per usual with a heritage permit application. And we'd also note that any significant revision that comes to these proposed developments, either as a result of changes to the site plan process, would come back to the committee for review and comments if there are significant changes. And that's just to give you an outline of the road that the applicants have before them in order to get this project approved. So the staff recommendation is that the report simply be received, and we are here to record your comments and your feedback, and if you have questions, I will try my best to answer them, but as I said, we do have a team of the delegations available to help with those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And I can see Daniela wanting to speak right up front. And as you say, Sue, this is the start of a process, and right now it's to receive the report and to provide some initial feedback with respect to what we see, but this is by no means the last kick at this particular can. So Daniela indicated she wanted to ask a question of you. Does anyone else wish to ask a question of Sue right now? Councillor Gittings? Anyone else? Well, obviously, you'll get the chance to raise your hand as we go along, but if I've got two right now, Daniela, off you go.
Okay, sorry, my earphones just died. Can you hear me okay on the speaker?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, I guess my question is ultimately, do you, Sue, and your team feel that there is any justification to change the zoning when the low density zoning was very specifically chosen for this area for a very good reason? And now we have an application that wants to amend that zoning to ultimately improve their opportunity. But do you in any way see this as a positive contribution to the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District? Personally, I don't see why it would be, but I'm very interested in how you would perceive that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, staff haven't formulated our opinion yet. We are here really strictly to hear from you today. And if that is your opinion, it is entirely valid, and I'm glad you have spoken. The only thing I can say is that currently the property doesn't meet the zoning either. It's a legal non-conforming use that doesn't match the new zoning bylaw for the area. That's the only thing I would say, that staff are kind of using in consideration right now. But heritage planning staff have not formulated our opinion, and as far as I know, neither have planning staff. So we are in the fact-finding stages, and the information we receive from you today will help us with those opinions as well.
Okay, I guess I just want to clarify that I see no reason besides one of profit to change the zoning in an area that does. I know that this was previously non-conforming, but we have an opportunity to improve, and I personally don't see any benefit to changing the zoning to a medium when it was carefully chosen as low.
That's a good comment, Daniela. So that's the kind of input that I think Susan indicates staff want to pick up. So your comment has been noted. Dave and then Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Susan, question on page 228 of the assessment that was provided. The proponent talks under 7.2, the impacts to adjacent heritage resources, and that the proposed development has been designed to be sympathetic to and compatible with. Is that one of the areas that the report coming back to planning and development would include? the thoughts from staff on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, this is obviously the opinion of the heritage consultant who's been retained to provide their preliminary opinion on the designs that have been prepared for this stage of the project. Yes, I do expect that heritage planning staff will provide their opinion into the planners working on the file for the report that will be going forward to Planning and Development Council. But as I said, we don't have that opinion formulated just yet.
All right, and so 7.3, the same feedback would be provided in terms of the proposed development meeting the objectives of the HCD plan. That would come back as well?
Yes, it would be included.
All right, 8.2, the proponent talks about providing low-density residential uses on the site. They are seeking relief and moving to medium density, are they not?
Yes, you are correct.
All right, so that's a question better off for the proponent. Thank you. And the last one, they talk about providing a generous setback on McDonald and Reynolds, yet it appears from the materials that they're seeking relief from the zoning for front and side yard setbacks. Mr. Chair, I'll leave that for the proponent as well. Thanks.
Yeah, I think so, Dave. Thank you. Okay, Jerry?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a question. I have a comment that we can address maybe when you open it up to the committee.
That's better. We're at the question phase just now. Comments will come later. Good. So are there any other questions of Sue on her presentation? If not, then Madam Secretary, if you could let us know which of the registered delegates wishes to speak, we'd be happy to say hello to them.
Mr. Chairman, there are the agents and the heritage consultants available for questions for the applicant, and David Capper would like to speak at this time.
Okay, Mr. Capper, if you can hear us, we can't see you, but we've been told apparently we don't need to see you, but I guess you could see us. And
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's wonderful. Mr. Chair.
You've just disappeared from me. You've gone mute, Mr. Capper.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
My apologies, I got kicked out for some reason, but I'm back.
Mr. Chairman, he was
thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for everyone's benefit, joining me this morning on our team is we have Bill Hicks, who is the project architect with Hicks Design Studio, as well as Jeff Hayes, who is the heritage consultant that had prepared the heritage impact assessment. We're here this morning as resources for the committee. We haven't prepared a formal presentation, but we're here to answer any questions that the committee may have. We are making furious notes in terms of the points that have been raised up until now. But I believe Mr. Hicks wanted to make a few comments with respect to the design of the building, and just to provide you with his rationale in terms of developing the concept as it stands before the committee and what has been submitted to the town. So on that note, I'd like to hand it over to Bill.
Okay, I think that would probably be okay, unless anyone can think of a specific question that you might answer for us, Mr. Capper. Perhaps we should wait to hear from Mr. Hicks. Now, Mr. Hicks, if somebody can unmute you. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, members. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Off you go.
Thank you. I got kicked out there too, but I'm back. So, yeah, I'll be very brief because the summary that was provided was fairly good in terms of some of the design rationale behind the building, where we've tried to break down the mass. We didn't want to have one large continuous facade on the building because we are trying to be sympathetic, knowing that we are on the edge of the district. So we think we've been successful in breaking down that massing. It is still early in the process, so we're still talking about materials, and we've had different comments about the possible use of brick versus siding versus other materials on the building. So we're still open to discussions on that part of it. I think that the questions of setbacks, I mean, Dave, Councillor Giddings had raised a question about the setback. We are seeking a variance for the required front yard setback, and it's simply a matter of working with the property and making the parking arrangements work on the property. It's to a large extent defined by the size of the parking spaces which are underneath the building. But we've specifically tried to hide all the parking so that you're not looking at a sea of asphalt, which is certainly what exists on the site right now. Some of the comments asking whether it's an improvement to the existing situation. We certainly see it as a dramatic improvement, and I'm sure we'll have some differences of opinion on that, but it's an interesting area in terms of the character of the area from us, because it had the hospital, which has obviously been removed and is being changed to residential. It's got a public or a private school that's adjacent to it at the back of the property. As you go down the street on Reynolds, you see more of these 3.5 story buildings, plus a new community center, plus the Oakville Trafalgar High School. So there's a wide range of sort of building styles and character in the area. So we saw that as an opportunity to do something that we felt was going to be an improvement to the area. Certainly the existing building, I don't feel has any architectural benefit or improvement to the existing space, but so we thought that it was an appropriate solution. And yes, it obviously we're asking for an increase in density to reflect the nature of the type of development that we're going to put on the site. So much like what we did on Shedden, which is close to being finished right now, we think that we can take a building like this and fit it into the character and the scale of the neighborhood, even being within a heritage district itself, and make it something that everyone would be proud of at the end. And I think I'm hearing comments even from the residents in the ratepayers area where Shedden's been built, other than it's taken too long because of COVID and everything else, that it is actually fitting into the character of the area quite nicely. So unless there's some specific comments, again, as Sue has said, it's in the early stages of design development, and we are waiting for comments back from the various departments. We've had one impromptu public meeting on it already, so we've had some public feedback on it as well. But we're certainly looking forward to the feedback from yourselves. So, thank you, committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hicks. Okay, now, are there any questions that any member of the committee has? Daniela, I can't see you anymore. I can see you muted, but I can't see you, so I don't know. There you go. So I don't know if you wanted to ask any questions at this point, because I couldn't see you. So does anyone wish to ask any questions of any of the delegates? Councillor Gittings? Anybody else? Okay, Dave, off you.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Bill. I appreciate your information. Could you comment on the maintaining the low-density residential character?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if you can hear me, if I've been unmuted, yes. But I know you had raised that question. I did forget to address that, and Dave Capper may want to address it further, but it is a medium density that we are requesting. The reference to the lower density is, again, we're trying to break down a mass into the scale of individual yet attached houses, call them townhouses or whatever, but it is definitely a medium density designation that's being sought on the property. So,
all right, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, Brenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hicks, could you tell me what is the percent coverage proposed with this design of the lot?
I unfortunately don't have the site stats with me on that right now, just because they're sitting in the office, but I think it's in the 60% range. I'm not sure if David can answer that question if he's got the site stats specifically with him, but I don't have that file open with me right now. So my apologies for not being able to answer that, but it does cover a good portion of the property, obviously because of the parking requirements that are underneath the building. So.
Thank Thank you.
Brenda?
That's good. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
good. Daniela, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I was just actually on the development relative to its
Your sound's
growing
breaking up, Daniela.
unit buildings.
Your sound was breaking up, Daniela. I couldn't make out what you were saying. Your image has now frozen.
I think she's frozen.
Yes.
And here,
Madam Clerk, should she log out and log in? She's lit
Yes,
up.
Mr. Chairman.
good.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting, I'm wondering if I could just answer the question with respect to the coverage that is proposed.
That would be good, David. Thank you.
Sure. So just in terms of the site stats, the building itself has an overall coverage of 60.43%, as well as a landscaped area of 27.25%. These, with the with the residential medium zones, coverage isn't in the RM4 zone isn't really regulated as a maximum. But in terms of what is proposed, that would be 60.43%. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, David. Did that answer your question, Brenda? Good. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
We're still looking for Daniela, or she could probably walk down the road and join me and speak from here. Might be quicker. Okay, well, Jerry, did you want to ask something or make a comment?
I wanted to ask a question.
Go. Ask a question.
I guess either Mr. Hicks or Mr. Capper, do we know how many units, apartment units, were in the existing building? They've been converted to commercial in offices, but originally it appears they were apartment buildings. Would we know how many there are presently?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did try to find out this information. It appears, based on some of the work that had been conducted by ERA, that the building perhaps originally started off as a medical office, then transferred into a residential use, and then transferred back to its most recent medical office use. In terms of the number of units, we do not know exactly how many residential units would have been within the building. But what we can say is that there are other examples of a similar, almost identical building further down Reynolds Street. We could look to those buildings as examples, but the answer to your question is no, I'm sorry, we do not know how many residential units are in there.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Mark, did you, sorry, you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry, it's Bill Hicks here. I do remember, 'cause we studied this property for quite a number of purchasers over a number of years. I do remember seeing an old set of drawings that did show the apartment units. My belief, and I'm going from memory, when I saw those, I believe there was 3 per floor. So 3 units per floor. So
That's helpful, thank you. Jerry, that answers your question. And then Mark, I think you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question to Mr. Capper. If you can just let us know, what is the density that will be resulting from this proposal?
The overall density, I believe, and forgive me, as I pull up my planning justification report, I believe we came in at 44 units per hectare. We were certainly at the upper end of the threshold for the medium density designation.
Thank you.
Okay, that was helpful. Now, just a sec. Can we get, is Daniela anywhere? No, I don't see Daniela again. No, not yet. Sue, you want to have a comment or question?
Okay, there we are. If I remember correctly, when I read the early part of the report, that lot was, with the low density zoning, would have been okay with 5 detached homes or 8 semi-detached homes. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, under the existing zoning provisions, under the RL5 zone, we believe that it was around 4 or 5 units, depending on the type of frontage that would be proposed, that would be permitted as of right. Not commenting on how the lot sizes would look, but roughly that's how many units could be accommodated on the site under the existing zoning and official plan provisions.
Okay, so if I can just further to my comment there, I don't have a huge problem with being able to house 14 units on this piece of land as opposed to 5 units or 8 units, depending on whether they're fully detached or semis. I think it's important that as citizens of the world and citizens of our region, that we're not too NIMBY about allowing some increase in density of housing within the city in order to prevent or reduce the amount of development spread that goes into the agricultural lands and the parklands and the green belt. So my feeling, and I live very close to here, I'm around the corner on Trafalgar Street and Trafalgar Road, is that I don't have a huge problem with this particular increase in density for this particular development. And I think that there can be some visual things that the architects may be able to come up with that could even, make this look even more house-like instead of condo-like. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
That's a good comment. Thank you, Sue, especially as you're saying so close to a transportation hub, just a short walk up the road. Okay, Daniela, I think you seem to have reappeared. You're muted, but can you hear me? Daniela? I can see you.
I've had problems. I don't know what's wrong with my connection.
Right?
Yeah, go ahead. I have bad.
Okay, you shut down again. You're back again, but muted. Oh, it seems we can either see you or hear you, but not both.
I know. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, and that's fine. So go for it. But we can still hear.
Okay, sorry. I think that I just feel that for the town of Oakville to spend money on a plan, I think we have to be really careful that we respect that plan. There's a lot of reason, there's a lot of talent, resource that has gone into that development. So I really am concerned about any shifting on density that is that contradicts the knowledge, the work that's gone into that plan. So I feel quite strongly that we need to respect the work that's been done. Otherwise, anything and everything starts to happen based on individual views. So I think I probably already made that point clear, but that's my view.
Yeah, that's the kind of comment that staff are picking up on, and that'll go into their into their system. So we've gone around a few times. We've had presentations. Any other questions, should we say, of the developer right now? So if there aren't any other questions, any further comments that people would like to make? Jenny?
I'd say that, I'm in agreement with all of the comments that have been made on this, and they are opposing some of them, but I would like to say that we have a collective historic memory of this high-density block on this site. And there is a history to this building, and the options are to renovate the building as is and retain that block, which I think is not as amenable to the historic nature of the residential characteristic of the building as we read in the heritage attributes of the area. And I think that to captivate a medium density on this site is in keeping, I think, with the heritage attributes of the district. And I would just add that, you know, at the next stage, beyond the conceptual design stage, that more consideration be made to the elegant integration of the building towards the Oakville vernacular style. I think the development as it stands right now is a very lovely piece of architecture, but in further developing to perhaps capture more of the vernacular Oakville nature. But as Sue had mentioned, I would see no problem with the medium density, because I think it is a better alternative than what presently sits there as a mass, as a block on the site. So I think this proposal is a gentle massaging of what's there towards meeting a single residential. So I don't see a problem with that. I think it's a lovely solution presented.
Thank you, Jerry. David, you appeared now and I can actually see you, and Kathy wants to speak after you. Did you want to say something?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. Mr. Simeone had asked me about the overall density. For the record, I just wanted to correct myself. I believe I said, I thought it was 44 units per site hectare, but it reached the upper threshold of what's permitted. The actual density that's proposed is 49.5 units per site hectare. So it is at the limits of the medium density designation range, which is from 30 to 50 units per hectare. I just wanted to clarify that point for the record, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David. That's noted. And Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to concur with Jerry's comments and remind people that they did try to renovate and update the building, and it didn't really go very far. They tried a sort of a different frontage and trying to sort of bring it up into the 20th century, whatever. And I do think, you know, you'd be hard pressed, given that you've got apartment buildings in the area, that you've also got various other forms, and now the new community center. I think that it fits in keeping with the area, and I'm, like I say, supportive along the same comments as Jerry.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kathy. Yeah, the building that's there right now is pretty solid, pretty massive, and if it was converted to an apartment building, which I guess they could do, they could just gut it or do what they did with it. Okay, George? Get your sound on, George. That's it. You're on.
Okay. I've heard comments about the density. I've heard comments about what's been developed on Shedden. But what about the opposite side of the east side of McDonald Road, north of the old hospital building, where they're proposing housing units and single families on McDonald? It seems to me that's more in keeping with the area. And I think the area would be better served with 5 or 8 semis on that lot as suggested in the plan, or not suggested, but referenced in the plan. Excuse me, the comments. And I think that that would be better serve the intent of the plan. When you think of, we haven't seen the designs, I gather, yet for the housing units on the east side of Reynolds to the north of the new development. But my initial thought is that this is much more appropriate. The suggestion for single family or semis would be more appropriate for the plan and the area. Thank you.
Okay, George, got that? So if that's you, put your mute back on again. That's it. Well done. And you didn't need any help from Carol to do that. Thanks, George. So, okay, any further comments? Sue, do you think you've got a good... Oh, here we go, Brenda. Another comment. Off you go.
Thank you, Mr. to increase the density is important. However, I'm shifting from a low density to the top end of a medium density. I don't support that. I would be comfortable with a shift to the low end of medium, but not to the full end. The other is just a general comment that when I look at the design, the concepts as presented, I don't find that they read as two-story houses, and I do support George's comment that I think a semi-detached would be fine in terms of giving that sense of space and regularity with the other homes around it, particularly if you look across the street with Campbell House and all the single-family homes currently on the north side. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. So, Sue, have you been picking up all that? You'll be able to watch it again anyway on YouTube ad nauseam if you want to. But has anyone else got any more comment or input to give? I think it's been good discussion, good input. Okay, so all we have to do now to complete this is to receive the report. So if I can have a motion, Councillor Duddock has made the motion that the report be received. Anybody opposed to that motion? Seeing and hearing none, that motion is carried. Okay, so the next item on our agenda has sort of popped into the agenda. It's our local planning appeal tribunal, but don't be confused by that, because as it says in the very first paragraph, this is the OMB come back again under a different disguise. So I believe the town solicitor, Mr. Perlin, was to introduce this to us. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do with it. No doubt he will explain that to us. So, Dennis, are you anywhere?
The clerk is just trying to patch him in.
There he is. Right. Good morning, Mr. Perlin. Nice to see you. Thank you. And you're going to tell us all about the LPAT decision that we have in our agenda. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis, you have to unmute.
I was unmuted. All right. Thank you. I am now unmuted, I think. The case was provided to the committee by the mayor. I believe it was provided as a case. It's about the St. Lawrence neighborhood in Toronto, and I believe it was provided in terms of its commentary with respect to the relationship of a heritage conservation district plan as it relates to an official plan and the zoning bylaw for a similar area. And the further work needs to be done, and my suggestion might be to refer it to me for a more formal analysis and report if there's interest by the committee. But the elements of concern would be the commentary by the tribunal about what they called prescriptive or mandatory provisions in the district plan, that there shouldn't be those type of prescriptive standards. They should be guidelines. The St. Lawrence plan in Toronto describes them as guidelines, but the tribunal and those who appealed the district plan to the tribunal insisted that they were set out as prescriptive elements, such as mandatory step backs when you're developing buildings in the St. Lawrence neighborhood, certain building wall heights, and query, do we do the same when it comes to our own district plans in Oakville? And we do use the word guidelines. We do have step backs at times in terms of what the step backs should be. But is there a conflict in our Oakville district plans in terms of the use of the word guidelines versus mandatory requirements? And do they, if they are mandatory requirements, do they conflict with the official plan or the zoning bylaw for the area? The tribunal, for example, indicated there shouldn't be a conflict. When you come forward with a district plan, these matters should be worked out. But more importantly, the tribunal did say that really whatever is in the district plan should be guidelines, and the context should be what dictates what might happen. So a step back might be a guideline, but it shouldn't be a prescriptive guideline, a prescription. It should be taken as something to consider when an alteration is brought before Heritage Oakville or before council with respect to what the alteration is proposing. It shouldn't be an absolute requirement. I think those are some of the concerns that the mayor was suggesting be looked at in terms of the impact it may have on our own district plans, if any, this case in Toronto. And if the committee is interested in exploring it further, as I said, I'd be glad to research it in more detail, discuss it with heritage planning staff and land use planning staff, and come back with a more fulsome report to you.
Thank you. I think when I was reading it, I guess it's the old issue that you have, that if we leave those gaps where we say something in the official plan, something in zoning, something in heritage, and there's conflict there, these are gaps through which the OMB and the developers will drive a coach and horses. So I guess from my point of view, I'd love to see that the Oakville official plan and its zoning, and because we've been through that exercise, we have gone through a whole OPA, we did a whole zoning exercise that was all designed to make sure that everything worked in tandem. So I think it would be entirely appropriate to look at particularly our new heritage district plans, which we have recently introduced. The old ones need work anyway. Like we haven't redone the Trafalgar one pretty well since it began, but we've redone the second district plan. I would like to think that it's consistent. So from my point of view, I don't know what anybody else thinks, I think it's better now to find these gaps and plug them than to wait until something terrible drives through. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that. Councillor Gittings.
Thank you, Chair. Dennis, if I could, is this the first example of an LPAT decision that talks to this in terms of districts?
There are numerous LPAT decisions regarding district plans, and in fairness to you, Councillor, I did not have a chance to go back and look at those. This is the most current, and it is somewhat troubling in terms of some of its language. But I can't help you more than that, sorry.
All right, fair enough, I appreciate that. Madam Clerk, could you help us with some wording here? Can the committee make a recommendation that Councillor Duddick and I can bring to council when the minutes come up, or would you prefer this to be a request for a report or something of another nature?
That would be helpful if we could do that, Councillor Gittings, because I know that we can't, as a committee, sort of undertake the expenditure of staff time or external funds. But I think if we were to suggest to you in the form of some motion that we would recommend to council that further examination of this decision as it relates to Oakville's planning and heritage policies would be requested, then if you two took that up with council, I think from my point of view, I'd feel quite comforted by that.
So, Mr. Chair, can we take your wording?
If you were taking notes, remember what I said, then yes. And
we have it on tape. I think we're good.
Right, so if somebody would move what I just said, perhaps George would do that, or Brenda has done it. So And this can all get played back, so I'm sure the words will be there. But you got the sense of it? I mean, if people disagree with me, please wave hands and jump up and down. But I really do think that we should be informed and advised by the emerging decisions and jurisprudence. That's only intelligent. So we should go back and relook at our own foundation documents and just make sure that they're all operating consistently. So if Brenda has moved that, or do you want to speak, Brenda? You just moved it, okay.
I just had a supplement to that, Mr. Chair. The reports for or documents for item 4A and 4B referred to the need to, or the idea of looking at a way to protect farmsteads, and that it's something missing from the cultural heritage landscapes documents. And perhaps that's something could be added for consideration, because my question earlier was we had 61 properties that were identified. We don't seem to have a consolidated plan for how we will protect these agricultural heritage elements. And I would like to see that as part of this if possible.
That would be a review of our cultural heritage landscape plan, I think, specifically to address a particular issue, Brenda. This is a wee bit different, I think. I mean, that's a kind of a mission creep, I feel like. I think, I'm not saying it's not worth doing, but I think this particular suggestion or recommendation we're making to council, I think, is specific. So we could pick that up at some later date if you're happy. But your motion is that we should accept the recommendation that I've kind of outlined, and if that's it, then that's it. Sue?
Mr. Chair, I've tried to cobble together a recommendation. If I could read it out, is that all right?
Good for you.
That the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee requests that Council request a report from town staff regarding the implications of the LPAT decision in case MM 160020 in regards specifically to Oakville's Heritage Conservation District plans and existing planning policy.
And would that include a cultural heritage landscape plan? You said our existing district plans, but doesn't our cultural heritage landscape plan also fall under that heading?
The Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy can include heritage conservation districts, but it doesn't always. In fact, most of the properties that we've been dealing with on an individual basis either end up as Part 4 properties or nothing. But certainly our existing heritage conservation districts like Old Oakville, Trafalgar Road, the 1st and 2nd Street District in downtown are all considered cultural heritage landscapes as well. So there certainly would be an element of that included in this, in what I've included here, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Duddick?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, perhaps the clerk can assist in the wording. My only concern is at the onset of the motion, you say the committee requests. I would suggest it should be recommends versus requests, given that the committee cannot direct council.
No.
The gist of it is still the same. It just means you're not overstepping.
Excellent. Thank you.
I like that. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're all in agreement with what we're trying to do here, and we're just stacking up some more work for Dennis and his people to do, and I'm sure he's delighted to hear that. Anyway, so we've got the motion. If there's no further discussion, is there anyone opposed to it? Seeing none, I declare that motion carried. Thank you very much, Dennis, for joining us this morning.
Mr. Chairman,
okay.
Just to clarify, Secretary. Brenda Sweeney is the mover for that motion.
That's right. You got it. Okay, so the next date and time of our virtual meeting is Tuesday, the 15th of September at 09:30 hours. And I look forward to joining you virtually again on that date. Thank you all very much again for the gift of your time and for your valuable input today. A motion to adjourn is, well, there's Bob. Bob got his hand up first. So there'll be no one opposed to that, so I declare this meeting closed. Well, thank you very much again, everybody. Bye.
So I'll type out the recommendation and email it to you?
Oh, that's okay. I got it.
You got it? Okay.
It's freezing. It is. Thank you.